Didn't anyone ever tell you there's one thing you never put in a trap? If you're smart, if you value your continuing existence, if you have any plans of seeing tomorrow, there's one thing you never ever put in a trap. Me. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Series 5 two-parter, the first two-part of the series, The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone, written by Stephen Moffat and is directed by Adam Smith. We'll also later on be talking about Meanwhile in the Tardis, Scene 2, written by Stephen Moffat and is directed by Richard Senior. Now, this is a very big important story in terms of the production of Doctor Who. It's the first two-parter in the Matt Smith era, as well as being the first episode film for Series 5, therefore making it Matt Smith's and Karen Gillan's first ever time acting in the role. So this is their first performances in the role. It also features the return of the Weeping Angels, characters that were introduced in Series 3 of Doctor Who in the episode Blink, which was a hugely, just stupidly popular story, and it basically it's what got Stephen Moffat the job as showrunner, with so many people praising it and having Weeping Angels themselves beat the Daleks in a poll of best Doctor Who monsters in the Doctor Who magazine twice. So that is some really big milestone in the series. So when Stephen Moffat was about to take over as showrunner, of course the first thing he would do is bring back his iconic monsters into the series. There's also something we need to talk about in terms of Stephen Moffat. When Stephen Moffat was working under Russell T Davies, he had a very particular style. It seemed like his more interests seemed to be much more focused on the horror on elements, with stories like Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, Blink, and to an extent The Forest of the Dead and Silence in the Library, having very high themes and very great very great villains for the series, bringing out new monsters with particular skills and particular type of method of trying to defeat them. When Stephen Moffat then took over as showrunner, me and a lot of people presumed that the series would continue on, that his era would be a lot more scary, a lot more serious and self-toned. So it was a bit of a surprise that when he did take over as showrunner, the series took on a fairy tale feel, a fairy tale environment. However, with the reintroduction of the Weeping Angels being their first traditional appearance, because Blink was a very unusual episode, so this makes it their first normal episode into the series. I think a lot of people were hoping that, and I guess we did in a way get, the return of the Stephen Moffat types of storytelling that we all loved from his earlier era when he worked for Russell T Davies. However, well, let's talk about the genuine opinion, because a lot of people really like this story, though they do criticize it for certain elements. One happens at the very end, which we'll get on to, the last scene of the story, kind of that last scene, if you know what I'm on about, as well as having some criticisms over certain scenes revolving around the Weeping Angels. But apart from that, a lot of people consider this a success and a really great stellar introduction and a first outing for Matt Smith's incarnation. However, for me personally, I'm going to warn you, if you're watching this video is going to turn into a rant. Not that I don't like this episode, there's a lot to like here, but there's a lot of issues I've had, not just with Doctor Who, but with many other franchises in recent memory. And I can pin it down into Doctor Who. I can pin it down all my problems, especially when it comes to the Stephen Moffat era, to this episode, to this narrative. Because if there's one thing I've learned from this story, and continuing on from every other two-parter that Stephen Moffat has written, when it's him in full control, he is great. He is absolutely phenomenal at writing first-parters. Second-parters, he kind of stumbles on a road, and then something happens which again has become a rant. And if you're someone who knows me, you will know that this is a topic which I feel very passionate about, and it's not an issue. It's an issue with Doctor Who in the Stephen Moffat era, but I also find it is an issue in franchises in recent memory across the board. So this video might be less about my opinions on the actual story and more talking about this particular subject in mind when we get there. So be warned. But anyway, before we get out, this is the official vanilla release of the story, which also comes with Vampires of Venice. This is the official BBC cover, which is a slightly updated version of the Russell T Davies era, obviously with the new logo and stuff. And for some reason they've moved. I'm sure like in the other ones, the Doctor's faces are down there, now they're up there. But like always, when I have my own DVD cover, I print out my own DVD cover to connect it with the classic series, so it all looks nice and tidy on my shelf. So before, let's connect these and we'll get on to the video. 1, 2, 3. There you go. So that's the cover. That's on my screen. Oh, that's on my shelf. Sorry. This is by Christopher Doctor Who DVD covers, which you can easily find on the internet. Just type in Doctor Who DVD covers. He's usually the first one that comes up. Nice, stunning image. Oh, the story also features River Song from her return to from Silence of the Library and Forest of the Dead. So really nice to see Alex Kingston return to the role. She plays the character a lot different to here, but we'll get on to that when we get on to that. We have just a really nice little stunning image. Here's the spine, if anyone is interested, with handsome young Matt Smith there. Matt Smith was the youngest Doctor to play the Doctor when he took on the role. That is just mental. And there's the back of it, with it saying like also includes Vampire Venice and the Monster File about the Weeping Angels, which is like a little short behind the scenes making of the two-part Angel episode. So that's new, cool, and nice and tidy. So anyway, let's get on to the episode at hand, because as I say, I think the first episode and the first half of episode 2 are really well handled. I was a bit nervous in going into this, feeling that the idea of exploring the Weeping Angels was a bad idea, because it's about it's about something like the fact that we don't get a lot of information about them, the fact that it's very limited information we get known about them, that makes the Weeping Angels so terrifying. And I felt like if you explain too much, if you show too much, that horror factor can easily be dissipated. It does happen, but in the first half, in 3/4 of the story, the Weeping Angels are actually handled very well. Before that, we get a pre-credit sequence where we get reintroduced to Professor River Song, even though this is before she's a professor. So she's just River Song in this. And she's infiltrated the Byzantium, this massive ship which is storing something inside the belly of the ship, something which could never die. And she gets onto a home box, as the Doctor describes it, because in 12,000 years in the future, the Doctor and Amy go and visit a museum where this home box, a box that stores all the flight data, but also it's like a black box, only it gets sent it flies off and sends home. However, it didn't somehow didn't arrive, and so it now is in a museum many years later, which the graffiti with River Song has installed upon it, which is actually Old High Gallifreyan, the same writing that was seen in The Deadly Assassin, and I believe it appears as well in The Five Doctors. So that's a really cool continuity reference in there, and some really nice tie into the classic series. Only for the saying on the box to be "Hello, sweetie," and so the Doctor takes the box. He sees some footage of River Song, who she gives coordinates to thanks to the security cameras, and she escapes as the ship starts crashing. The Doctor and River Song reunite, and that basically kicks off our adventure. And we get the start of the story has a lot of interactions with River Song, the Doctor, and Amy, and Amy's just absolutely loving this. As River Song seems to have this dominatrix personality to her, to which you can basically boss around the Doctor, and the Doctor would obey. But the Doctor isn't too happy that River Song is involved. In fact, when he takes her to where she wants to go, out to see the Byzantium, he goes back into the Tardis and does actually plan to fly off. However, he promised Amy that he will show her a planet, and this is for Amy Pond's first planet. And so they go out to investigate with River Song, to which she basically reveals there are angels. And she's also working with a military organization, which is actually a future religion. Here it's just called a church, and despite the symbol, we need to talk about that symbol later on as well in a bit. We'll talk about that in a sec, but it's implied here that it's like either Christianity or Catholic, but we later learn in the story it doesn't really contradict anything. It's just never actually stated. It's just implied because you have bishops and you have the clerents, but we later learn that this is actually a church called the Church of the Pana Mainframe, which would later be known as the Church of the Silence. So that's all Stephen Moffat connecting everything, and this is their first appearance in the series. We also get mentions of headless monks, which also ties into later episodes. But let's talk about that logo that they use, because when this episode came out, there are many fan theories on what the church is supposed to represent, and it all comes down to that logo. For those of you who don't know, that logo is the Greek letter Omega. And Omega himself is a character and is the one of the founding fathers of Time Lord Society, thanks to his stellar engineering, which allowed time travel to be possible. And so you had the symbol Omega with a church, and people theorized that this was a church dedicated to Omega, or Omega will be involved in the series somehow. None of that played out, whether that was intentional or whether it was a complete coincidence that the Omega symbol, or maybe it was to tease for something and it never actually happened. We never know. But it's very strange. It's very odd. And I don't think the symbol ever returns again. I don't think so, anyway. I'm not quite sure. It might appear in A Good Man Goes to War and Time of the Doctor. I could be wrong there. But anyway, so we get introduced to Octavian, basically the bishop of this military organization, which is helping River Song to basically track down this angel. Basically, they've hired River Song to help them deal with Weeping Angels because she's an expert on it, and she basically promises them the equivalent of an army. this equivalent just so happens to be our favourite Time Lord, the 11th Doctor, making their first interaction in his 11th face. It is important to note that something that was really strange when first watching this story is that it doesn't feel like it comes straight after Forest of the Dead and Silence of the Library, as the Doctor and River Song's relationship here, like, I don't think it's ever brought up that the Doctor even knows about River Song's death, and that they have this kind of buddying relationship here, and the whole concept of her dying is never brought up again in this story. However, that has been retroactively fixed now that the 10th Doctor has had at least 3 audio drama adventures with River Song that concur between the 2 stories. So that's pretty interesting to note. Now let's talk about River Song and the Doctor here, because a lot of people, I'd say a lot of people, but a handful of people criticize River Song's involvement in this story, specifically how Alex Kingston plays her. Not that she does a bad job acting, she does a fantastic job, but the way River Song is played here is a lot more flirty and a lot more tongue-in-cheek than her previous appearance in Silence of the Library and Forest of the Dead. This River Song is a little bit less mature in certain regards, and she likes playing off the Doctor here, and just takes so much amusement in the fact that she knows more about future events in the Doctor's life than she had previously. With the Doctor, he does get along with River, and he does have this buddying relationship with her. However, he isn't happy with the fact that she knows more about him than he does, and tries to avoid her as much as possible, and has, at the start of the story, has this sort of, not like this regret about her, and that is some really interesting stuff, and the story does do a lot interest in there. And the majority of part 1 is focused on these caverns, I can't remember what they're called, the Catacombs of Death, a Maze of the Dead, that's what they're called, where we see a bunch of statues, because as it's explained in the story, the original civilization on this place, in this planet, the 2-headed race, the Applans, they basically made this place with a lot of statues in it, and all of these normal humanoid statues are everywhere, which puts that this one-weeping angel has a great place to hide in dark catacombs full of stone statues, so it highes the stakes. And for a majority of part 1, it's a lot of atmosphere and build-in, and it works phenomenally well. There's some great scenes in which we have basically red shirt soldiers slowly getting picked one by one, and the Doctor is learning about River Song, and Amy Pond's just enjoying it, and they, there's some really fun interactions here. There's a great moment where basically River Song shows them that they, in the Byzantium, there was this video clip, which whilst Amy Pond is looking at it, the Doctor's reading this book where he learns that an image of an angel becomes itself an angel, and whilst that is going on, and we learn through the Doctor and Rivers the new abilities of the angels, which we don't learn yet, Amy actually has this really intense moment. It's probably one of the most iconic scenes in the entire series, is where the video clip of an angel starts moving, despite it being only a 4-second repeated clip. The angel in the clip actually starts moving, and at one point actually leaves the screen ready to kill Amy. But Amy starts looking into the angel's eyes, which the Doctor warns her not to do. And she later destroys the angel by by pausing it at the exact moment there's this glitch in the video, stopping the angel, the image of an angel, and therefore stopping the angel. The image of an angel is therefore an angel. So that's some really cool, some really intense moments, and the twist in part one where they realised that, wait a minute, the statues, they don't have two heads like the Applans would have. And it clicks. Every statue in this maze is an angel. It's not just one. It's an entire army full. And the Byzantium's energy, its radiation, and its deadly particles is actually dinner to the angels. They're actually restoring themselves. But because of this, they don't need to send people back in time. Therefore, they kill their victims by, as it's explained, just snapping their necks extraordinarily quick. At one point, one character, Bob, who gets comforted by the Doctor, gets killed, and the one angel, specifically the one from the spacecraft, resurrects his consciousness so that he can have a voice to speak to the Doctor. And that is just really terrifying. I think it's a slightly controversial ability to give the angels. Personally, I love it. It gives, it's not really giving the angels a voice per se, but they reanimated Bob in a way which he could speak for them. And there's some really great moments, like near the end of the cliffhanger, he basically tries to anger the Doctor by saying, Doctor, you told me to be scared because it will save me, it'll make me quick and make me stronger, make me more alert. However, I died scared and alone. The angels just wanted you to know that. I'm sorry, sir. And the Doctor gets pissed. And so the Doctor and this small group of churchmen and stuff, he has a plan. He points out that there's this massive flaw in the trapping of these characters, and so he gets a gun and he makes this massive speech about how you don't put him in a trap, which was used in basically every trailer for Series 5, and it was probably one of the most iconic, and it's also the start of Stephen Moffat just making these riveting speeches. If there's one thing Stephen Moffat knows how to do, and something his era is known for, it's the speeches. Almost every massive speech in his era is always a 10 out of 10. Without fail, without question, 10 out of 10. And this is one of them. However, there was actually a controversial moment in this scene, and it doesn't actually happen in this scene. For you see, when the story aired back in 2010, when this cliffhanger was airing, people were very distracted by, and sadly weren't focused too much on the fantastic speech and the fantastic performance of Matt Smith. Instead, you had a next up advertisement underneath with Graham Norton appearing and taking up half of the screen, which was very distracting. And a lot of people complained to the BBC about this, and it's become a sort of joke with Graham Norton for him being one of the greatest villains in the Doctor Who series. So just a little fact for you there. So now we're going to get into part two. Now let's get into things that I liked first, because we're going to get into the big one in a bit. I like the change in set. In part one, mainly is set in these catacombs. Part two is mainly set in the Byzantium. And though we have this little corridor scene at the start, which is very clean and slick, the majority of episode takes place in this giant forest inside the ship. And we've because the story, two of the scenes, one's in a forest, one's in this rocky area, but they're both in dark and giant enclosed environments, means that the episode, despite having a massive shift in environment, still feels like the same episode. You don't feel like there's a massive jump, because the lighting is very similar, only now there's forestry in the background, which is really cool. And we get this really terrifying plot element where, because Amy looked in the eyes of an angel, she is slowly, I don't know if she's becoming an angel, or is she an angel's in her mind ready to kill her, or it's coming out of her brain until she dies and her brain stops working, like say the screen, when the screen stops working, stops showing an image of an angel, the angel dies. I don't know how really that works, but it leads to some really great intense scenes. There's a scene in which Amy's hand, she believes it's stone, and the doctor snaps out of it by biting her hand. And there's also a scene in which there's also a recurring element where she seemingly is counting down. She says like 10 by accident, and by that point it's like, oh, okay, it's a very strange moment to add in, but okay. And then when she says 9 later on in the episode, you go, oh Christ, this is something to do with the angels, and that freaks the doctor out, and he tries to get Bob to try to explain why they're doing it, to which Agent Bob, Sacred Bob, is like, just wants to scare her, just wants to have fun. However, now we're getting into the element, my main criticism with this story. For 3/4 of the story, whether you like this story or not, whether you were engaged in this story or not, doesn't really matter in terms of what I'm going to have to explain. What matters is that it is telling its own self-contained story, and it is engaged in that adventure. The story is about Dr. River, Amy, and these soldiers dealing with these angels. It has its own storyline, its own things it wants to tell. The stakes of the angels are very well established, with the Doctor basically learning how the angels are testing him, and he is, he's trying to work problems with that, and all of our characters are suffering through these emotional struggles. It's its own episode, it's its own adventure, and it's telling its own story. Until the crack in time is revealed in this episode as being the main energy source that the Weeping Angels want, and that the energy source cannot be fed by the angels. It's a blast of pure non-time, where time has been fractured and they can't feed off that. And so the episode stops telling a story. It stops being a fun, engaging story about angels. It stops doing that. It stops having its own moral compasses and its own narrative. It stops whatever Stephen Moffat was trying to do, and the entire episode from this point on is, by the way, this is a teaser for the finale, which is it's really, this is something which Stephen Moffat has a massive problem with. How, we have these stories which they might start off as self-contained stories, but then they bombast into these story arcs, and they just like, hey, this is going to be an important thing in the future. We're going to keep teasing events in the future for the big finale, which really undermines the smaller episodes, in my opinion. And this is something, it's not just with Doctor Who, it's with loads of franchise. It also is a criticism, in a way, on how people actually view stories. Because it's thanks to ideas like this, like how people just loved being teased. And I understand that. But why can't the tease and the enjoyment of it be connected with the story it's telling now. I mean, the teasing of the start, the part one, where we get the tease of the angels, the tease of River Song and her relationship with the Doctor, and the teases of the army of the angel and all that. That is teasing in a good way. This episode ends with the basically teasing up for a completely different story, a completely different narrative. And people love that. And I don't. And it has, in my opinion, it seems to have alternated how people talk about stories in a way which, personally, I find less interesting to talk about. Because think about it. How many times have you heard people criticize a series like an entire series of Doctor Who, mainly because the story arc isn't as fluent? You will have stories which are awesome and great, but because now they are self-contained and stand-alone, people just don't want to talk about them. And the word filler becomes a massive keyword for people in discussions. This is criticism less now to do with Doctor Who and mainly with this idea, because a lot Doctor Who is structured in a way where essentially every episode is a filler if you think about it too hard. And so people always want something which will tie into the big bombastic stories at the end. And so when a story doesn't do that, it's filler, I don't care. And I find these kind of discussions really dull and uninteresting. Like, this episode mainly gets talked about because of the fact that it has this crack in time and it ties into the finale. And when people talk about Series 5, they mainly talk about the story arc and the crack in time elements of the story and the narrative and all that. Whilst it makes lesser known episodes a lot more underrated, and episodes which just want to tell their own little story get very overlooked, in my opinion. And this is just something which really just gets under my skin. And though the episode doesn't, the way I describe it sounds like it just completely turns into the crack in time. It doesn't really. There are some moments with the Weeping Angels. However, now we get into a really controversial scene. Basically, Amy has to close her eyes because the image of an angel in her mind is coming out, and she closes her eyes in a sense to try and starve the angel, not giving it any images to breathe, in a sense, to turn off Amy's visual perception. I don't know about the science of that, but it works in context of the story. And the Doctor, River, and Octavian. Did I mention he was played by Ian Glynn, the guy from Game of Thrones who would later on play Batman in Titans? Yeah, that Ian Glynn. He made an appearance in Doctor Who before he became this massive television star, which is just really cool to see. And he has a very great prominent role where he has this kind of button-head relationship with the Doctor, but he tries to keep the secret from him by River Song, in which River Song is being sent to prison, and he tries to protect her from telling the Doctor. However, he does threaten her at one point as he starts losing more and more men. And there's also some really great scenes with him. He's probably one of the most interesting one-off characters in the series, which again gets so overlined by the whole crack in time scene. And he has a pretty heartwarming death scene in which him and the Doctor finally connect. But he also warns the Doctor not to trust River Song, which is, again, this is something for the future. She killed a man. She killed a good man. I can't tell you who. You'll just have to find out. You don't want to know. But, it's teased for the future. But I guess that's part of River Song's character, so it does kind of make sense here. And the crack in time. Sorry, I was talking about the controversial angel scene. So essentially, at one point, the Doctor needs Amy to head back to follow her, but she can't open her eyes. So they have this signal thing, which will point her in a direction. However, she suddenly finds herself surrounded by a group of angels, but because they think that she can see, they pretend to still be stone and still freeze in place, despite the fact that nobody can see them. And so the Doctor basically tells Amy to, act like you can see. And when she falls and collapses, and the angels realizes she can't see, we finally see the weeping angels move. We see the angels move. We see their heads turn, you see their hands moving, and that completely ruins the concept of the weeping angels. When that scene plays, the angels, whatever makes the angel a part of the mystery, the suspense of the angels, that's gone. God damn this ending. We also get a scene in which the crack in time is basically feeding off everything and it scares the angels away. This happens earlier on where Amy is basically being left with 4 soldiers, and each one of them basically goes up to the crack. It's like, I need to investigate that. It's like, sure. While 2 of them go off, and then one of them, when it's just the 2 of them, another one is like, I need to go and investigate. But Amy tells the last soldier, it's like, hold on, shouldn't we wait for the other 2? What other 2? The other 2 before you sent the other guy. What other guy? It was just me and you. It's always been me and you. Again, this kind of takes away from the bigger focus of the narrative of the Weeping Angels, makes the whole threat. Think about it. There's even a scene where the Doctor basically admits that in terms of the larger concept now of this story, the Weeping Angels aren't that interesting. There's a scene in which him and Octavius are talking, and they're like, right, we've got to get away from the angels. And the Doctor's just like, there's far worse things than angels to worry about now. The Doctor freely admits that this story has taken a terrible turn in terms of writing. I know I'm seeming really negative about this, but it just really bugs me because I was really getting invested in this story, in this narrative. As soon as that crack in time appears, as soon as they actually focus on it and they give it attention, and oh my god, this is something big for the future plot line, it just stops being it stops being a story. It starts becoming a trailer, and so the story ends in a very clever way in which the angels have been draining the energy off the ship, and the Doctor realizes that the gravity in the ship will disappear, and if they hold on to something, all the other angels will be flung into the crack in time, and because they're all strange time traveling anomaly events, a spatial anomaly, the crack being fed off by all of these angels closes it up and also cures Amy Pond. With the final moments with the Doctor and River Song, just a constant teaser of things to come. Oh, you killed a good man. A good man. Who was it? Oh, I can't tell you that, but it's a good man. Which, by the way, I know this is a nitpick. I think it's a nitpick, but wasn't it absolutely obvious that the person she killed was the Doctor? Who else was it going to be? They constantly tease, oh, it's a good man. The person she killed was a good man, one of the best people she's ever known. The only emotional character that we know of her is the Doctor. There's no other way it could be. And the River Song also teases like, you will meet me again very soon when Pandorica opens. Something which Prisoner Zero once mentioned. Silence will fall when Pandorica opens, or when the question is asked. The Pandorica will open. So there's that massive teaser again for the series. And so the story ends with this really controversial scene, which is the scene I was on about earlier. And yeah, it's a very controversial moment, especially looking at this in hindsight. Essentially, Amy asks the Doctor to go back home, and the Doctor takes her back home, and she basically reveals to the Doctor that she's running away from her wedding. It's the night before her wedding, and she's scared and nervous. However, she's been thinking a lot, and she's been scared to death, and the Doctor came and saved her. And she's been thinking about her relationship, and she's been thinking about the Doctor a lot. Quite a lot. And she's been thinking about the Doctor in the ways of who she wants. And then she starts snogging the Doctor. And the Doctor, I love how the Doctor freaks out by this. It goes back to the asexual nature of classic Doctors, more specifically the Fourth Doctor. The 11th Doctor even points out that when he finds people attractive, he says probably, as if he doesn't know, because he doesn't look at people that way. And the story ends with the Doctor realizing that in the morning is the date that the crack, because he used this machine to basically analyze the crack in time, and realizes that it's the night after Amy Pond's wedding, and somehow that's all connected, and that something, and the Doctor's just like, right, something very important is happening to the universe, and it's got to be fixed now, and it has something to do with you. You're the most important person in the universe. This also ties into another issue with the Stephen Moffat era, where his companions are the most important people in the universe, which is kind of dull. But this is the first time it's happened, and well, I'd say it's the first time it's happened in the Stephen Moffat era. Russell T Davies has done this, but it's more of the Doctor genuinely likes them rather than something to be involved in the plot. So this is the first time a companion has been sort of linked with this a mass story arc, which is kind of interesting in a way. And so the Doctor takes Amy into the TARDIS to try and track down Rory. And that's the end of that story. But before that, we also have Meanwhile in the TARDIS Scene 2, which ties in this story with the next story, in which Amy's trying to get a kiss from the Doctor, but the Doctor basically explains and breaks down why he needs a companion, and how he doesn't see it anymore. When he explores the sun, he knows how it's made, he knows the chemical compounds, he knows how it was created, and he knows how it will end, and he's probably been there. And the mystery, the excitement of travelling and adventures, that's gone. But when he has companions, when he has friends, they see the wonders of the universe. And when they see it, he sees it. That basically sums up the 11th Doctor. There's a lot of scenes where he basically takes enjoyment by showing other people the adventures of the universe. I mean, that sums up the Doctor, but mainly the 11th Doctor in particular. I love that description, and I love how it's not particularly portrayed as a good thing, as if the Doctor is sort of being manipulating his companions. Even though it does lead into this joke of Amy basically is like, wait, that means I'm not the first person that you've taken around. And how many of those just so happen to be girls, and attractive girls? And the Doctor also jokes about how he's not like a bloke, he's not a typical boy, he's more like Space Gandalf, which, by the way, I don't know if that's a reference to the Last of the Time Lords, because the Master called the Doctor Gandalf at one point as well. We also get clips of a majority of all the Doctor's companions, with a main focus on Leela. My favourite companion gets a shout out because of a very revealing costume, to which Amy just takes pure enjoyment because she's basically trying to prove to the Doctor that he's a bloke. The reason why he takes female companions is because he fancies them, and he always tries to like diminish all the men in the room. And there's a great minute when she mentions Rory, and the Doctor just snorts at her. That's a funny moment. And then it teases into the next episode by basically revealing that the Doctor is going to interrupt his stag do, Rory's stag do. And so, there you go. That is Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone, and Meanwhile in the TARDIS Path, Scene 2. Overall, I was enjoying the majority of this adventure. I had a lot of fun, and I was really hooked and engaged for the majority of the adventure. However, in my opinion, as soon as that crack in time is revealed and the story stops being a story, I can no longer enjoy it, and it becomes a platform to tease new and next stories, which really underlines its main narrative and main focus. It's an issue where in retrospective, it's just really gotten under my skin, and it really just drives me up the wall. But, you know, it's not like the most important thing in the planet, but it does annoy me. If you enjoyed it and enjoyed it for the elements that I don't like, perfectly fine. However, you know, this kind of stuff really doesn't interest in me. And if you like these kind of stories, I will say that you are limiting yourselves in enjoying more self-contained, more smaller stories, in the vain hope that, you know, everything will be tied in together and everything is going to be connected, and we got to have these mentions, these teasers for later episodes. Everything's got to be building up to something philosophy, which, you know, it's not that you can't build up to stuff, but when you have to stop your narrative to basically be like, hey, tease this, then, in my opinion, that is a bad story. And it's a real shame, but I don't think this story holds up well because of that. But the Meanwhile in the TARDIS, that was pretty fun. And the controversial moment at the end with Amy, which got a lot of people's heads turning. Yeah, I agree, that was very poor taste. That Amy would not only fancy the Doctor and basically just want to sleep with him. She doesn't really love him. She just fancies him and just wants a one-night stand. The night before her wedding to Rory Williams makes us feel really, really unlikable. But there you go. That's Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. Pretty disappointing. So join me next time when the Doctor, Amy, and now joined with Rory go and have a little holiday to try and unwind and talk about things. As the Doctor probably has an introduction with Rory. However, something's lurking in the city of Venice as seemingly a cult is forming in, and they seem to be part of the supernatural mythos. So join me next time for Vampires in Venice, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!